Hello, thank you for joining us today. My name is Julie Muhn. I'm Senior Research Analyst here at Finovate. We are here at FinovateEurope 2026, and today I'm talking with Dimitri Mason, CEO at Gradient Labs. We're going to be talking about the build versus buy question and also preparing for an AI-first future. Dimitri, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so to start off, tell us about what core problem Gradient Labs helps banks solve today, and why that problem is more urgent now than ever.
Yeah, no, really good question. And probably the most important one, right? So let me kind of give a bit more background of where we are. I've spent probably the last 12 years of my career in fintechs, or in banking in general. And I think if you look at the last 15 years, the banks were essentially transitioning from branch banking to mobile banking. And the idea was always to create an amazing customer experience, right? So essentially everything at your fingertips in your app and so on. But what most of those fintechs actually realized that even though they've created those amazing apps, a second half of the problem still remained unsolved. And the second half of the problem is essentially that all of those companies still require gigantic human organizations to power those accounts. So I'm talking about the customer ops organization. And if you look at companies like Monzo, Wise, Revolut, there will be in thousands of people, and obviously for larger traditional banks, 10,000s of people. And so that part is very, very difficult to manage from a business perspective. You have just like 20 different specialist teams, and that's the source also of many bad experiences that customers still face today. Even though something might be really slick on the app, but whenever you are off the happy path, it just goes really bad and you wait for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so we believe we're now in the second wave or second transformation, large transformation over the last 30 years, where you essentially have transitioned from branch banking to mobile banking, and now you will transition to something that, let's call it agentic banking. It's a made-up word. I'm not sure whether it's real, but the idea is that a lot of this kind of huge, messy organizations on the customer ops that you require to run accounts day to day, you essentially can now automate through AI agents. And in order to do that, you essentially need to transform how financial services work in terms of how they can actually do sophisticated workflows within companies across all their systems in a coordinated way, essentially how humans would do it today. And so we at Gradient Labs essentially allow to embed those AI agents into the banking systems.
Interesting, yes, very forward-looking and futuristic. So a lot of banks now, they're behind a little bit in experimenting with AI, and banks are experimenting at different speeds. What advantages do banks gain when they move from traditional automation to agentic AI compared to those who don't?
Yeah, no, totally. I think, so there I need to say something as well. I tried to automate lots of customer operations processes in banks for like 7 years. So I was one of the early Monzo employees and kind of had a fun journey building out the bank. And I think what we've just seen is with traditional automation techniques, you just can't automate many of the things that banks are required to do because they're just too messy, they require judgment, they require nuance. It's not just writing an if-else statement and you're done. And so really, most of the processes remain beyond of reach of automation. And I think at the beginning of 2023, when GPT-4 came around, it kind of dawned on us personally and on the founders at Gradient Labs that now you can automate also those messy processes that were doable by humans before. So it essentially unlocks a completely different spectrum of automation. And so that's why I would almost say it's not like this versus that. It unlocks a completely new area of automation, the new agentic AI.
Yeah, that's such an interesting way to think about it. I love that. So at the beginning, we talked about the build versus buy conversation, which is like an age-old question in fintech since fintech began. But I want to talk to you about that because I think it's an important one when it comes to AI. So how should banks think about building capabilities in-house versus outsourcing to third-party providers?
Yeah, I would say everyone has to partner in some way, right? Because like even if you decide to build yourself, you probably would not build your own LLM, right? So you would probably partner with Anthropic or OpenAI or Google or whoever it is. And so for me, it's not a question of build versus buy. you will need to buy something.
Yes.
So it's more of a question at which level of abstraction you buy. So you go to the lowest level and you say, okay, the only thing available to me are the LLMs, so I'm going to partner with Anthropic and they're going to forward deploy a couple of engineers and help me. Or you adapt a more kind of higher level framework. Let's say there are lots of conversational frameworks or agentic frameworks like LangChain, for example, that will just help you to speed up the deployment process, I don't know, from multiple years to maybe a few months, right? And so that's the main question there. And so that's how we're positioning ourselves as well. So we're thinking about, we are at a higher level of abstraction in general. So we allow banks to get to value much quicker.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's always some sort of partnership. So it just depends on the level of abstraction and how long you want to build in the end.
Yeah, that's such a good point that you everyone has to rely on those basic providers for LLMs.
For
so
sure, yeah.
At some point, everyone will have to buy over build.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to think about it.
Yes.
All right, so now you hinted at this in your first answer of this agentic AI future.
Yeah.
We've heard analysts talk about a future of agentic AI where it essentially is the interface, and the graphical user interface that we've been used to since the 1990s is going to be no longer.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about, if that happens, how a bank's role might change?
Yeah, I actually don't believe it will happen.
Okay,
so
there we go.
I'm a bit skeptical about this.
Yeah.
Just because, think about how you use your banking app, right?
Yeah.
So most of the time you probably just open it to check your balance, to check your recent transactions.
Yeah.
And imagine now you would need to wait for seconds and ask that question every time to an AI agent to even know your balance. It just doesn't seem nice or fast or natural, right? So I do believe for a certain range of functionalities, there will be specialized apps that make it super fast and easy like today.
Yeah.
But I do believe a lot of the stuff where you would maybe need 3 clicks to get down to the functionality, it will be just much easier not to search, but just say, I want X.
Yes.
So hence, I still believe that there will be a lot of needs for actually banks and core banking apps. So they will not go away, but a lot of the stuff, how you interact with them, will be easier, especially for the long tail, more complicated journeys.
Yeah, I get that. That makes sense. That's interesting to hear your perspective on it as well, that the graphical user interface will still be there for all of us.
I don't know whether you had to instruct others to do something for you ever, very precisely, right? So I have an AA and she's very, very smart, but it actually takes a lot of precision to ask for certain things that you want to have. So even if the AI agent is as smart as humans, you really need to master a lot of precision to say exactly what needs to get transferred to where and when.
Yeah.
It's just much easier and faster to do it yourself. So that's why I'm a bit skeptical of fully AI interfaces.
That's true. Yeah, it's more practical being able to see it. Very good. Well, now I want to talk about risk and governance. So as AI becomes more embedded and more autonomous, as we're starting to see, how are banks thinking about governance and risk when it comes to leveraging AI?
Yeah, I think everyone is finding their feet right now, right? So the way I see the industry is evolving, last year, most banks would play with small POCs on the edges and would experiment with AI. I think this year, towards the end of the year, we're going to see first full-scale deployments, and really next year is when it's going to really take off. In terms of governance, I think everyone is figuring it out still, but I personally think it's useful to think about AI similar to how you would judge humans in a way, because in a way, AI agents have tried to act very similar to how humans would act in your ecosystem, right? So they're non-deterministic, they make mistakes, humans do that as well. And banks have found ways to how to deal with that, right? So they write, for example, guidances, i.e. standard operating procedures, which define how something should be executed so that you have a bit more consistency between multiple humans. You then do something like quality assurance and check that you are actually compliant. There are many different risk management and governance steps that you apply in human organizations. I think you will need to do something similar for AI, because it actually acts very similar to how humans act. It tries to reason, it tries to make decisions, and so on.
Yeah, so those written processes and procedures will still be very relevant and necessary going forward.
100%, because otherwise it's just going to be Wild West. Imagine AI just trying to figure out how to do card replacement.
Yeah, that would not be good.
No.
Well, to wrap things up, I want to look at this human side. To prepare for an AI and an automation-led future, what new skills or profiles do banks need to hire for or develop internally that maybe weren't critical 5 years ago?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a difficult question. I think everyone is thinking about it, but my personal view is that you still will need domain experts, right? This is not what's going to go away. So maybe like, especially if we right now look at functions within design, engineering, a lot of that work is a bit more generic and can be automated already now, and we see that, versus like domain specialists within money laundering or like KYC, like who have actually deep domain expertise. I'm sure it will be automatable as well, but right now, at least, that's kind of where humans still play a very important role.
Yeah.
Overall, on the skill set, I think somebody who learns fast is willing to become a generalist, because I think there's a tendency to become a generalist, because if you can absorb tasks around your orbit through AI, you can just be a lot more self-sufficient, a lot faster in producing results as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, hard to say, but I think generally, I think there's a tendency towards generalist, and obviously adopting and embracing AI. I don't think there's any way around it.
Yeah,
right
not
now.
at this point.
Yeah,
we're too far into it.
Exactly.
Very good. Well, Dimitri, this has been such an interesting conversation. I really appreciate your time today.
Likewise. Thank you.
And we hope you learned a lot through this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.